So Antifa. I pretty much alluded to most of my encounters with Antifa in the other video I made. Um, I have a lot more experiences that I've had with people over the years, friends that have been doxxed and people I know have been pressured and so on, but I'll just keep to my own experiences. If they ever want to talk about that, they can do that themselves. But yeah, I knew about Antifa a long time before I was ever a nationalist, long time before I got ever involved with any of this. Because when I was a teenager, I was involved with extreme far left politics. I guess it's a bit of a family trait to be involved with far politics of any kind. My father was a communist. My grandfather was a social democrat back in the days when that was still pretty much just Marxism, the days of Troelstra and so on. And I'm on the nationalist far right, right? Bit of a character trait to be on extremes, I guess. So I was as a teenager, I was in a communist group in Portugal. I grew up in Portugal. I'm Dutch by birth and lineage and so on, but I grew up in Portugal because my parents moved there. And I was in this communist group for about 2 years, involved with like environmentalist and workers' rights, but also a bit militant because in Portugal there's this myth about the Spanish Civil War among the far left, where at any moment the fascists could pop back up and start the war anew, and we have to be prepared to beat them this time because we can't suffer a defeat again. The kind of this idea of fascists under every bed that the far left seems to suffer from as a paranoid delusion pretty much everywhere, whether that's in Iberia or in the Netherlands or the United States, they always seem to suffer from that. So I was familiar with Antifa and with like far left ideas as a teenager, although I wasn't actually that political. It was more of a thing among the youth there. If you were a bit trying to be a bit interesting, that's what you would do, because 70% of people in Portugal vote for the extreme far left. Anyway, I actually encountered Antifa as like an organized group when I became more nationalist minded here in the Netherlands. And the first time was they tried to apply to join Erkenbrand under a false name, fake phone number. I gave them my phone number and I invited them to come to boxing practice that we were holding for drinks afterwards, not for the actual boxing practice. They drove up to the park through the parking lot where we were training and made a whole lot of noise so people would come outside and look. They took pictures of everyone and then they left. Subsequently, I was called up. The people who were going to come said they couldn't make it. Okay, fine. And then the next 2 weeks, I was called on my phone every day at 2 a.m. and at 6 a.m. by an anonymous number. I suspect the idea was to try and keep me awake or annoy me. And whenever I would pick up, they would just breathe heavily and nothing until I hung up the phone. But one day they forgot to put the anonymous number on, and I called them back and I got, hello, this is the voicemail of Collectief Antifascistisch Collectief Anarchief, so Kafka, Antifa. So then I knew who they were, and afterwards they didn't call me anymore. That was my first encounter with them. The pictures they took, they subsequently used to dox a few of the people there. They tried to intimidate the owner of the venue into giving up information by posing as journalists, although the owner of the place didn't know about any of what we were doing. He had no involvement with the group. So that was my first encounter with them. Before that, I had been fairly careless with personal information and so on. I mean, I've always used my real name. That may have been a mistake, but at this point, there's no going back. So there you are. But yeah, that afterwards I became more careful. Others especially became more careful. But over the course of the years, a lot of people have been doxxed. Although most of them were only doxxed on the Antifa websites, I was the only one who appeared with my face and my name in the newspapers. And I think that this has to do with the fact that you can't just publish personal information of anonymous people, of normal, regular private citizens here in the Netherlands. I was sort of a public figure because I'd been on live streams, I'd used my name, I'd appeared publicly, so I've been on TV before then. So I guess I could be called, a legitimate target for putting in a newspaper, but others were put on Antifa websites, uh, which is all technically illegal, but no one's going to start a court case, right? Because if you start a court case, it's more trouble than it's worth. You're going to draw attention, costs a lot of money, so no one starts a court case against Antifa, and that's how they get away with it. Um, yeah, so I can't really say much about it because these people themselves, if they want to tell about it, they'll maybe do it eventually. But I know that both the Volksfront and Antifa subsequently harassed and intimidated people and trying to get them to talk with them. No one ever talked to the media. People have learned from America that if you talk to the media, all they will do is gather more ammunition to attack you. So you should never talk to the media. That's really, don't even try. Don't try to be clever. Don't try to think, oh no, I can, even though they're going to attack me, I can come across positively. No. Any good points you make, they will keep out of the interview. They will just try to find more information on attacking you, and then try and intimidate your employer. It's no good. Don't talk to the media. Even if they threaten you, if they're going to do anything with the threats, they will do that anyway. So there's no point in talking with the media. There's also no point in trying to go to opposite media on the right or anything, because they're not sympathetic either, because you're beyond the pale and so on. So I personally didn't experience much from Antifa for a few months after that. And then after I had left Erkenbrand, a few months after that, there was police at my door suddenly, and they said, we have a report that you have firearms. Okay. Um, do you have a search warrant? No, they didn't have a search warrant. They went to get a search warrant because apparently if someone makes a report that someone has a firearm, the police have to follow that up. They have to search your house. They have to make sure that there's nothing to the report. So yeah, if you make an anonymous report about firearms, about anyone, if I call the police right now, melding Mr. Anonym, and I say my neighbor has a firearm, they're going to search his house. Seems like a pretty inefficient system to me, but there you go. Anyway, police searched my house. That took about 4 hours. Had a chat with the police. Police had no idea who I was, had no idea about anything. They just had an anonymous report. Dumb waste of time, but yeah, basically just more harassment from Antifa. That was that, and then January now, so about 8 months after that, some Antifa, I suspect it was Antifa, found where I was working, contacted my boss, got me fired. Though getting fired in the Netherlands is like, it's not the same as getting fired in the United States. You can't just be fired. If you have a contract, you have a contract, and you can't just be fired unless you do something wrong. So they had to agree a settlement package, and that was that. I mean, I left on fairly amicable terms, all in all, because these people, like, your boss won't really care so much about your politics if they aren't themselves politically active. They just don't want a fuss. They don't want any, they don't want anyone coming up with Molotov cocktails to their business, and they didn't want to be getting bad press. So they try to deal with it as little as problems as possible. Um, so yeah, I lost a job, harassment on the phone, friends doxxed, uh, house searched by police. That's about my experience with Antifa. Uh, I think you're in a better position in the Netherlands than in other countries, perhaps, because Antifa here isn't capable anymore of direct violent action. Um, or at least they haven't done that for a while, for about a decade. I mean, there have been political murders here. There have been attacks by Antifa, but it hasn't happened for about a decade. Um, so you're okay on that front. It's your reputation and your employment that you should be concerned for. So if you're going to go into nationalist activism, into politics, you can do two things. You can go full out, face and name, if you think you're in a position that you can do that, because at that point you're immune against anything they can do to you. Keep your language tidy, um, be presentable, use your real name and face. Not much that can happen to you except they ignore you. They do this with a few professors and so on here in the Netherlands who make good points against migration. They ignore them because they're too respectable to do anything about them. The other option is, if you want to continue to be anonymous, absolutely do not use social media. Stay away from Facebook, stay away from Discord, stay away from Twitter. They find information there. I've known of at least 2 people that were doxxed through Facebook, more even. And they also collect a lot of information on Twitter. Discord itself cooperates with Antifa. They pass logs and information on to Antifa, especially in the United States. I think it happens less in countries that don't speak English because the Discord staff probably doesn't speak so much English. Same thing happens on Twitter, by the way. You can get away with a lot more in Dutch on Facebook and Twitter because there's simply not as much AI programmed to deal with it. There's not as many moderators. So if you want to get into activism, stay away from social media. Don't reveal anything about yourself. Don't use a pseudonym that's close to yours. Don't say where you're from. If you have a heavy accent, that's already bad. That's a point against you. Like if you have a soft G, maybe try and speak ABN if you can. These sorts of things, they will likely find you. So try and make sure it's as least damage to you as possible, I would say. But on the whole, there's not so much threat from them, like physically, or so much threat from them in terms of like legal action, because we have reasonably free speech here in this country. If Thierry Baudet and Geert Wilders can get away with what they say, then half the time you can say what you want as well. Few people are ever prosecuted for statements, except if they are direct threats or calls to action. So, mind your language and you should be alright. Your main concern is your job and your reputation. Really, that's all there is to it. Yeah, that's about my experience with Antifa. Hope it's informative.